The ballroom glittered like a palace of light. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, the marble floor shining so bright it reflected every shimmer of the guests' gowns. A small orchestra played something elegant and distant, the sound almost too beautiful for the nervous rhythm in Ava Carter's chest. She had tried to convince herself this night would be fine. She wasn't here to make a statement or win anyone's attention. She only came because her old boss had invited her, and because hiding forever after a breakup felt even worse than facing the whispers. Then she heard his voice. "Still trying to fit in, Ava?" It came from behind her, smooth, confident, and poisonous. When she turned, Damien Hale was already smiling. He wore his success like a tailored suit, hands in his pockets, chin lifted, a drink balanced effortlessly in his hand. The man who had once promised her forever looked at her now as though she were an old joke told too many times. For a heartbeat, she thought he might keep his cruelty private. But he raised his voice just enough for the crowd around the champagne fountain to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, half-laughing, "you might remember Ava Carter, my old accountant. Hard-working, dependable, good with numbers, until she started confusing love with investment capital." A small ripple of awkward laughter moved through the group. Ava's fingers tightened around her glass. "Damien," she said softly, "don't do this." "Do what?" His grin widened. "Tell the truth. You did loan me money, didn't you? Or was it a gift after all?" His new fiancée, a model with flawless hair, looked her up and down with polite disgust. Ava's throat ached. "That's between us." "Oh, come on," Damien said, turning to the crowd again. "She actually believed I'd marry her. Quit her job, help me build my company from scratch, and when things went big," he snapped his fingers, "she thought she owned part of it. Isn't that cute?" The laughter came again, sharper now. It hurt because it filled the space where no one defended her. Ava wanted to move, to leave, to vanish, but her legs felt locked. The ballroom tilted around her, colors blurring, the sound of glasses and music fading into a hollow roar inside her ears. "Stop," she whispered. Damien leaned closer, voice low enough for only her to hear. "You never learned, Ava. The world isn't kind to sentimental people. Next time, sell your loyalty somewhere it pays." He straightened, ready to deliver another line to the audience, when the room itself seemed to change. The air went still, as if the orchestra had paused mid-note. A faint hush spread from the entrance, rippling through the crowd faster than words. People shifted, their conversations dying. Even Damien hesitated. Someone had arrived. At first, Ava saw only shadows moving through the parted crowd, a tall man in a black suit, walking with slow, deliberate steps. The kind of movement that didn't need to demand attention. It received it automatically. A waiter stumbled aside to make space. The stranger continued forward until the chandelier light touched his face. He was striking, not in a polished, charming way like Damien, but in a way that made people instinctively lower their voices. His eyes were dark, steady, and unreadable, like the deep part of the ocean that swallows light. There was nothing hurried about him, no sign of confusion about where he was supposed to be. He stopped a few paces from them. "Is this your idea of entertainment, Mr. Hale?" he asked. His voice carried easily, though he hadn't raised it. It was calm, measured, but with a weight that pulled every gaze toward him. Damien blinked, momentarily unsure. "And you are someone who dislikes noise." The man's gaze shifted from Damien to Ava, and something subtle changed in his expression, a flicker of recognition or perhaps disapproval at what he saw, her trembling hands, the single tear she'd been too slow to wipe away. He turned back to Damien. "Apologize to her." The crowd murmured. No one spoke to Damien Hale like that. "Excuse me," Damien said, trying to laugh. "Who are you to tell me?" The stranger's eyes didn't move. "Apologize," he repeated. "You've had your fun." Damien's confidence faltered, though he tried to recover it with a scoff. "You can't just walk into." The man took one slow step closer. "You don't want to finish that sentence." A tension crackled through the room. The orchestra stopped completely now. Even the servers froze, watching. Ava didn't understand what was happening, but she could feel it. This was someone dangerous. Not loud or violent. Dangerous because he didn't need to prove anything. Damien swallowed hard, forced a smirk, and muttered, "Whatever. She knows it's just talk." He turned away, but not before the man said quietly, "Walk away, then. But remember you were warned." And Damien did walk away, fast, pretending not to hurry. Ava stood frozen. The stranger turned his attention fully to her now. "You don't belong in rooms like this," he said. His tone wasn't cruel. It sounded like observation rather than insult. She found her voice. "Then why are you here?" He studied her for a long moment. "Because someone needed to stop him." She frowned. "Why would you care?" He didn't answer immediately. He simply offered his hand. "Come. I don't even know your name. You don't need to yet." She hesitated. The crowd was still watching, whispering. Staying meant drowning in humiliation. Following him meant stepping into uncertainty. Both felt dangerous, but one promised escape. Ava placed her shaking hand in his. He guided her through the parted crowd, past eyes that lowered as they passed, and out into the cold night where a black car waited. When the door closed behind her, the world outside was replaced by soft leather seats and silence. The city lights flashed by through tinted glass. Ava pressed her palms together, trying to steady her breathing. The man beside her sat still, one hand resting lightly against the window, his expression unreadable. She broke the silence first. "You didn't have to do that." He turned his head. "Do what?" "Embarrass him. It'll just make things worse for me." "He embarrassed himself," the man said. "And if you think a coward like that can make things worse than tonight, you underestimate yourself." Ava looked down. "You don't even know me." He regarded her quietly. "I know what humiliation looks like. I don't tolerate it." Something about his voice, the certainty, the control, both unsettled and steadied her. She dared to ask, "Who are you?" He paused before answering. "Lorenzo de Luca." The name struck her memory. She'd heard it whispered at work once, in stories half-believed. The De Luca family, owners of countless shipping lines, construction companies, investments no one dared audit too closely. "You're—" She stopped herself before saying Mafia. His faint smile showed he understood. "Yes. But tonight, I'm simply the man who stopped your ex from running his mouth." "Why me?" she asked again. "Why step in at all?" He looked out the window. "Because weakness attracts wolves. I don't like wolves in my city unless they work for me." That sentence made her shiver. "I didn't ask for protection." "You didn't have to. You were in my way." She blinked, confused. "Your way?" "I was meeting someone at that gala. Business. Then I heard him speak your name as if it were something to spit out. I dislike men who destroy what they once praised. So this is just coincidence?" "If you prefer that explanation, yes." The car slowed as it approached a narrow private drive lined with dark trees. Ava's heartbeat quickened. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," he said. "I have my own apartment." "Not anymore." He said it as calmly as if stating the weather. His friends, the press, whoever was filming, "Your face will be everywhere by morning. You'll be the headline. Scorned woman crashes gala. It will not be safe for you to be alone." Ava stared at him. "You can't just decide that for me." "I can," he said, "and I have." She turned to the window again, half angry, half terrified. "You think because you have money and power you can—" He interrupted, voice still even. "No. I think because I have power, I can stop men like Damien Hale from thinking they own the world." The car passed through iron gates that opened automatically. Ahead stood a house built of glass and stone overlooking the bay. More fortress than home. Dim lights glowed along the pathway like distant fireflies. As they stopped, a driver opened her door. Ava hesitated before stepping out. "I'm not staying here," she said. You are, Lorenzo replied, getting out beside her. At least for tonight. And if I refuse? He met her gaze. Then you'll walk away, and he'll win again tomorrow. The wind carried the salt smell of the sea. Somewhere far below, waves crashed against rocks. Ava followed him into the house. Inside, it was surprisingly quiet. The foyer opened into a long hall lined with paintings. Dark colors, stormy oceans, faceless people. A woman in a black uniform appeared, bowed slightly, and took her coat without a word. "This is Maria," Lorenzo said. "She manages the household." Maria's eyes were kind, though she looked faintly nervous when she addressed Ava. "Would you like something warm to drink?" Ava shook her head. "No, thank you." Lorenzo gestured toward a set of glass doors leading to a room filled with books. "Come." She followed him into the library. Shelves climbed the walls up to a high ceiling. A single fire burned in a stone hearth, giving the room a soft golden light. "Sit," he said, motioning to a chair near the fire. Ava remained standing. "You still haven't told me what you expect from me." Lorenzo leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "Expect nothing. For now, you rest. In the morning, we decide what to do about Damien Hale." "There's nothing to do. He'll just move on." Lorenzo tilted his head. "Do you want him to?" The question startled her. "Of course I do. I never want to see him again." "Then you should learn the difference between moving on and paying a debt." Her brows knitted. "A debt?" "He took from you," Lorenzo said quietly. "Your time, your money, your dignity. People like that understand only one language: loss." Ava shook her head. "I don't want revenge." He studied her a moment longer, then said, "Then at least take safety. I can take care of myself." "Can you?" He stepped closer, not threateningly, but enough to make her heartbeat jump. "Because from what I saw tonight, you're surrounded by people who watched you drown and called it entertainment." Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. He was right, and she hated that he was. "You don't trust me," he said. "Should I?" No, his honesty surprised her. "But you should trust the fact that everyone else in that ballroom fears me more than they fear you. That's something you can use." "Use how?" He moved to the fire, watching the flames. "Tomorrow, you'll accompany me to a business gathering. You'll be seen. People will assume you're under my protection. That will silence the gossip. So you're using me." He half smiled. "Perhaps. But use is not always harm." She folded her arms. "And if I refuse?" He looked at her again, calm and steady. "Then I'll have my driver take you home, and by morning your humiliation will be viral, your job gone, your name trending. Your choice." Ava felt anger rise, but beneath it, the helpless awareness that he wasn't wrong. She didn't want his world, but she also didn't want to be destroyed in hers. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "For tonight." "Good." His voice softened, almost gentle. "Maria will show you your room." As she turned to leave, he added, "Ava." She looked back. "When someone breaks you in public, don't rebuild yourself in secret. Make them watch." She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and followed Maria upstairs. Her guest room was larger than her entire apartment. Soft gray walls, a wide bed, curtains that moved slightly in the ocean breeze. Maria left her with a cup of tea and a quiet good night. When Ava finally sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion caught up with her. The night felt unreal: humiliation, rescue, captivity, all tangled together. Through the window she could see the distant city lights flicker across the water. Somewhere below, waves crashed against the cliffs. And downstairs, the man who had stopped the world with a single sentence was probably planning his next move. She whispered to herself, "What have I gotten into?" Down in the library, Lorenzo de Luca watched the fire die. He poured himself a glass of dark whiskey, the reflection of the flames glinting off the surface. In the quiet, he spoke softly, almost to the empty room. She doesn't understand yet, he murmured. But by the time this is over, no one will ever dare say her name in mockery again. He took a slow sip, eyes on the flames. Outside, the wind carried the sea's distant roar against the cliffs, a promise that the storm between them had only just begun. The morning light broke pale and silver across the city skyline. Ava didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damien's smirk, the laughter, and then Lorenzo's eyes, cold, unreadable, commanding the room like he owned the air itself. When Maria knocked softly at dawn, Ava was already sitting by the window, wrapped in a borrowed silk robe, watching the ocean crash far below the cliff. Mr. De Luca is waiting downstairs, Maria said. Ava's stomach tightened. For me. Maria nodded once. He doesn't wait twice. The words were not meant as a threat, but they sounded like one anyway. Downstairs, the same man from last night stood by the glass wall that overlooked the water. He wore another black suit, perfectly cut, dark tie, no expression. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the waves beyond the glass. You didn't sleep, he said without turning. Ava hesitated. I tried. He nodded slightly. Understandable. The first night under my roof is never restful. She frowned. Do you often have guests like me? Never, he said simply, and finally faced her. Sit. She obeyed, mostly because defying him felt pointless. A tray sat on the low table between them. Coffee, fresh bread, fruit sliced neatly. Everything in this house seemed ordered, deliberate, even the light. Lorenzo poured coffee for both of them, his movements slow and practiced. You'll need your strength. For what? She asked, suspicious. He handed her the cup. For what comes next? I already told you, I don't want revenge. He met her gaze. You don't have to. But you do need redemption. Ava frowned. I'm not the one who needs it. You misunderstand. His voice softened slightly, though the power beneath it remained. You need to redeem yourself to yourself. What happened last night, what he did, took more than your dignity. It took your belief that you can stand in a room and not flinch. She looked down into the dark coffee. And how exactly am I supposed to get that back? By pretending to be part of your world. That would be a start, he said. But pretending is not enough. You'll have to convince them. Convince who? He leaned back, studying her. The same people who watched you break. They need to believe that you were never broken in the first place. Ava shook her head. That's impossible. Not for me, he said calmly. And not for you, if you listen. She stared at him, half wanting to argue, half drawn into his certainty. And what if I don't want to be seen with you? What if I just want to disappear? Lorenzo gave a faint smile. Disappearing is another kind of death, Ava. You've already died once in that ballroom. I'm offering you a resurrection. She laughed bitterly. You talk like you're saving me. He didn't deny it. Maybe I am. The silence between them stretched, filled with the sound of distant gulls. Finally, she asked, What do you really want from me? Lorenzo set his cup down. Loyalty. For a short time. That sounds like a business deal. It is, he said. Tomorrow evening, I'm attending a private auction. You'll come with me. She blinked. What? No. Yes, he said evenly. You'll be introduced as someone under my protection. That will silence any gossip from last night. People will stop mocking you. They'll stop mocking me for being in the same room as him. And Damien Hale will understand the meaning of regret. Ava leaned back, her pulse quickening. So I'm your tool. You're my ally, he corrected. I don't even know how to play your game. Then I'll teach you, Lorenzo said. You're quick. You'll learn. Ava set her cup down and looked away, watching sunlight glint on the waves. You sound so sure of yourself. I have to be, he said quietly. People who hesitate in my world don't last long. There was something in the way he said it, faint weariness behind the calm. For a second, she saw not the dangerous man from the gala, but someone who carried too many unspoken burdens. She asked, almost gently, "Do you ever get tired of it?" He blinked. Of what? Being feared. He looked at her for a long time before answering. Fear keeps peace, Ava. It keeps people in line. Without it, the world becomes chaos. That's not peace, she said softly. That's silence. Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe even respect. You speak boldly for someone who trembled in front of a crowd last night. I'm not trembling now. No, he said, and there was the faintest hint of approval in his tone. You're not. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, Be ready by 6 tomorrow. Maria will prepare what you need. And if I refuse? She asked. He stopped at the door. You won't. That night, Ava paced her room, trying to understand the trap she was walking into. He wasn't wrong. Her face had already appeared online. Every social feed she scrolled through twisted the story. Jealous ex causes scene, bitter accountant crashes gala. Damien's public relations machine was working fast. By morning, she would be a scandal. Unless she accepted the protection of the man the entire city already feared. She closed her eyes and whispered to the dark, What choice do I have? Outside, a black car waited at the gate, its headlights slicing through the mist. The next evening came faster than she expected. Maria had left a dress on the bed, dark green satin, elegant but not too revealing. Mr. De Luca's instructions, she said. He prefers you wear this. Ava frowned. Does he always choose what people wear? For business, yes, Maria replied simply. He doesn't like unpredictability. When Ava looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the reflection staring back. Her hair was styled in soft waves. The dress fit perfectly. She looked composed, controlled, almost untouchable. Almost. Downstairs, Lorenzo waited by the car, speaking quietly to one of his men. He looked up as she approached, and for the first time, his gaze lingered, not on her face, but her posture, her steadiness. Better, he said. I wasn't aware I was being graded. He opened the car door for her. Everyone is, in one way or another. The car slid through the city streets, leaving behind the isolation of the cliffs for the glowing skyline ahead. Ava sat silent, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Lorenzo scrolled through messages on a sleek phone, his expression unreadable. Finally, she asked, This auction we're going to, what is it really? He glanced at her. A gathering of people who like to pretend money buys them taste. That's not an answer. He smirked slightly. It's a social battlefield. You'll see. And what am I supposed to do there? Nothing, he said. Just stand beside me. Listen. Watch. Say little. So I'm a prop. He turned toward her. You're a message. There's a difference. She frowned. What message? That no one humiliates you and walks away untouched. The conviction in his voice startled her. He meant it, not as flattery, but as law. When the car stopped in front of the venue, a converted museum turned private club, security guards in black suits stood in perfect silence. As soon as Lorenzo stepped out, they nodded and opened the doors without question. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old books and expensive wine. A string quartet played softly. The crowd turned as Lorenzo entered. Conversations paused, eyes followed. He moved like a man who owned everything he saw. Ava followed a half-step behind, feeling the weight of every glance. She could almost hear the whispers. Is that her? The woman from the video? What's she doing with him? Damien Hale was there too. Of course he was. Standing near the champagne bar, laughing with investors who suddenly fell silent when he noticed who had walked in beside Lorenzo. His face drained of color. Lorenzo's hand brushed lightly against Ava's back, not possessive but grounding. Smile, he said quietly. You're winning. She managed a small smile, though her heart raced. They approached the center of the room, where a group of men and women in tailored suits gathered around an art display. Lorenzo exchanged brief greetings, calm nods, polite words, but his attention never drifted far from Damien. The auction began, but the tension between the two men filled the space louder than any bidding. At one point, Damien stepped closer, forcing a thin smile. "Mr. De Luca, didn't expect to see you here." "Then you don't pay enough attention," Lorenzo replied, his tone polite but sharp. "It's a habit of yours." Damien's eyes flicked to Ava, then back to Lorenzo. "You found interesting company." Lorenzo's voice dropped a shade lower. "Careful with your words." Damien's smirk returned, weaker now. "I didn't realize she was." "You didn't realize a lot of things," Lorenzo interrupted. "Like when to stop talking." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Damien swallowed, gave a strained chuckle, and stepped back. "Of course. Enjoy your evening." As he left, Ava felt her hands shaking. Lorenzo leaned slightly toward her. "Breathe. You did fine." "I didn't do anything." "You didn't run," he said. "That's more than most." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Ava found herself observing Lorenzo as much as the crowd observed them. How he navigated conversations with quiet power, how every movement seemed measured. People feared him, but they also respected him. That kind of influence fascinated her. When the final bid was made and the guests began to leave, Lorenzo guided her outside, where the cool air hit her face like a wake-up call. She turned to him. "You really hate him, don't you?" "I don't waste hate," Lorenzo said. "But I do collect debts." "And what about me? Am I one of those debts?" His expression softened for the first time that night. "You were a witness. Now you're part of the story." The car ride back was quiet, but not empty. The tension between them had shifted, no longer hostility, but something uncertain, heavy with unspoken questions. When they arrived at the mansion, Ava stepped out and turned toward him. "You said this would silence the gossip. Does that mean I can leave now?" He studied her for a moment. "You could. But I think you've only begun to understand what power feels like." "I don't want power." "Everyone says that," he murmured. "Until they finally have some." He walked past her toward the house. At the door, he paused. "Good night, Ava." She watched him go, confused and restless. The ocean wind carried the scent of salt and rain, and she realized something had shifted inside her. The humiliation from the gala still burned, but underneath it grew something sharper, resolve. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. Inside, Lorenzo entered his study and closed the door behind him. One of his men waited by the desk. "It's done," the guard said. Hale's investors saw him lose composure. "They're pulling back already." Lorenzo nodded. "Good. Make sure he understands what it means to stand against me." "And the girl?" the guard asked carefully. Lorenzo's gaze turned toward the window, where her reflection lingered faintly in the glass. "She thinks she's still a guest," he said quietly. "But she's more than that now." He didn't explain further. Outside, lightning flashed far out at sea, silent and distant, but moving closer with every second. The morning after the auction dawned gray and windswept. A thin veil of fog curled around the cliffside mansion, softening its sharp edges. Ava stood on the balcony outside her room, her hair whipped by the sea breeze. Below her, the world looked small and unreachable, the roads, the distant city, the memory of who she used to be. She had faced Damien again. She hadn't run. But the triumph tasted strange, half victory, half unease. Behind her, a knock sounded. Maria entered, silent as ever, carrying a breakfast tray. "Mr. De Luca will see you in his study." Ava turned, startled. "Now?" Maria only nodded. "He said you would understand why." The study was wide and shadowed, lined with shelves of leather-bound books. Lorenzo stood by the window, his suit jacket draped over the chair, sleeves rolled to his elbows as he reviewed a set of documents. The morning light fell across him, cutting his sharp features into planes of shadow and gold. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he said quietly. "I thought I'd earned a good morning at least," Ava said, trying for lightness she didn't feel. He smiled faintly, still reading. "Good morning, Ava." She sat across from him. "So what happens now? You've made your statement. Everyone saw us together. You humiliated Damien. Mission accomplished, right?" Lorenzo finally looked up. "Not quite. A public wound takes more than one bandage." She crossed her arms. "You mean this isn't over?" "It's far from over." He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "Damien Hale has influence, or he did. The people who laughed at you last week will be watching now. They'll want to know if you've truly risen or if it was just a show. And you want me to keep pretending?" "I want you," Lorenzo said evenly, "to make them believe it was never a pretense." Ava's pulse jumped. "How exactly am I supposed to do that?" "You'll stay by my side," he said. "At least until the next phase of my plan is complete." "Your plan?" she repeated, skeptical. "Which is?" "Removing Hale from every circle of power he still clings to. His reputation, his company, his allies, they'll vanish one by one. And you will be there when it happens." "That sounds like revenge." He shrugged slightly. "Justice, if you prefer softer words." Ava rose from her seat, frustration flashing in her voice. "You're dragging me into something I never asked for." "You're already in it," he replied calmly. "The moment I stood beside you at the gala, your story and mine became connected." "I didn't ask for your protection," she snapped. "And yet you needed it." The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. She opened her mouth to argue, but he cut her off. "You've been underestimated your entire life," he said. "By him. By your colleagues. By yourself. I don't intend to continue that pattern." She frowned. "So what? I'm your project partner," Lorenzo said, leaning back. "But there are rules." "Rules?" she repeated. "Of course there are." "You'll live here for now," he said. "You'll attend events with me, dinners, meetings, auctions. You'll speak when you have something worth saying, and you'll listen when you don't. You'll carry yourself as someone who answers to no one but herself." "That sounds a lot like pretending again." "No," he said. "That's learning." Her frustration cracked into a shaky laugh. "You really think you can turn me into someone like you?" His eyes softened. "No, Ava. I think you can become someone stronger than you were." She studied him, torn between anger and reluctant understanding. "And what do you get out of this?" He smiled slightly. "Peace of mind. And perhaps the satisfaction of watching a fool learn what he lost." "You mean Damien?" "I mean everyone who underestimated you," Lorenzo said quietly. "Including you." A long silence followed. Ava stared out the window, the horizon blurred by mist. Finally, she said, "If I agree, what happens when it's over?" "Then you walk away," Lorenzo said. "With your name clean, your dignity intact, and your past buried." "And if I don't agree?" He didn't answer right away. He just met her gaze, steady and certain. "Then you'll spend the next few months watching the world believe Damien's version of your story." Ava exhaled slowly. "That's not a choice. It's the only kind worth making," he said. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Fine. I'll do it." "Good," he said softly. "Then it's settled." He stood, reaching for his jacket, and added as he passed her, "Rule number 1, Ava, never apologize for standing beside power. You may not belong to this world, but it already believes you do. Don't prove them wrong." That night, Ava sat in her new room staring at the moonlit waves. The sea was restless, endless, alive, and she wondered if it reflected what she felt inside. She'd made a deal with a man who scared her and fascinated her in equal measure. But more frightening than him was the thought that, For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. Days turned into a rhythm. Morning walks along the cliff garden. Silent breakfasts broken only by Maria's soft steps. Evenings spent in the vast library, where Lorenzo read reports and Ava studied quietly at the corner table, learning how to move in his world. The mansion felt like a fortress, not only from others, but from who she had been. One morning, Lorenzo summoned her to the library again. A team of stylists waited there, their cases spread open like surgical tools. Dresses, fabrics, shoes. Ava froze at the doorway. "What is all this?" "Preparation," Lorenzo said. "We have a charity event tomorrow night. You'll attend as my guest." "I thought I already passed your test at the auction." "That was the rehearsal," he said. "This is the performance." She eyed the stylists suspiciously. "And you think a new dress will make me someone else?" "No," he said, "but it will help the world see you differently." One of the stylists held up a gown, silver gray, simple yet commanding. Ava hesitated before stepping forward. "I don't need to be remade, Lorenzo." He met her eyes. "I'm not remaking you. I'm reminding you who you could have been before he convinced you to play small." Her breath caught. She didn't answer, just nodded slightly and allowed the transformation to begin. Hours later, when she looked in the mirror, even she had to pause. Gone was the quiet accountant who had once hidden behind others' success. The woman staring back had sharp eyes, calm shoulders, and the faintest trace of steel in her smile. Lorenzo walked in without knocking. He stopped mid-step, studying her reflection. "Well?" she asked, her voice steady but uncertain. He tilted his head. "You'll do." Ava rolled her eyes. "That's all you have to say?" His expression softened. "You look like someone who finally stopped apologizing." That made her smile despite herself. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It was one," he said quietly. The next evening, they arrived at the charity event together. Cameras flashed like lightning as soon as they stepped out of the car. Ava flinched at the first burst of light, but Lorenzo's hand found her back again, steady and warm. "Smile," he murmured. "Not because they deserve it, but because you do." So she did. Inside, the hall glittered with chandeliers and laughter. She felt eyes following them, curious, calculating. Damien wasn't there this time, but his name still floated in conversations she pretended not to hear. Lorenzo moved through the room with practiced grace, greeting people with the easy confidence of a man who never had to explain himself. Ava stayed close, her posture perfect, her nerves hidden behind a calm expression. A group of investors approached, their smiles polite but their eyes sharp. "Mr. DeLuca," one said, "you're full of surprises these days. We heard you found new company." Lorenzo's tone stayed smooth. "I prefer capable company." The man laughed awkwardly. "And what field are you in, Miss Carter?" Ava's first instinct was to shrink back, to mumble something harmless. But then she remembered Lorenzo's words, "Never apologize for standing beside power." "I was an analyst," she said clearly. "Now I help manage Mr. DeLuca's financial interests." It wasn't entirely a lie. He had started asking her questions about reports, seeking her opinion more often than she'd expected. The men exchanged impressed glances. Lorenzo didn't correct her. "She's been quite valuable," he said. "Numbers never lie, unless you let the wrong people handle them." The meaning wasn't lost on anyone. Damien's reputation for creative accounting had been whispered about for years. As the group moved on, Lorenzo turned to her. "Not bad." She smiled faintly. "You didn't tell me I'd have to improvise. You didn't need me to." Later that night, as the event wound down, Ava stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights. For the first time in weeks, she felt something like peace. She could breathe without feeling small. Lorenzo joined her quietly. "You handled yourself well. Thanks to your rehearsed scripts," she said. He gave a soft chuckle. "You didn't use a single one of them." She laughed. "Maybe I'm learning." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Do you still think I'm the villain in your story?" "I think," she said slowly, "you're the man who showed me that fear can look a lot like freedom, until you learn the difference." His gaze softened. "And which is this?" "I haven't decided yet." They stood in silence, the city far below, the wind cool against their faces. The distance between them hummed with something unspoken, not romance, but recognition. After a long moment, Lorenzo said quietly, "Rule number 2. She turned. "There's a rule number 2? "Never let anyone see you uncertain, even when you are." Ava smiled. "And what happens if I break it?" "Then they'll eat you alive," he said simply. She looked back at the lights, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then I guess I'll keep pretending until I'm not." "That," Lorenzo said, "is how strength begins." When they returned to the mansion later that night, Maria met them at the door with a faint smile. "The papers are already online," she told Ava, handing her a tablet. "They're calling you the mysterious woman at De Luca's side." Ava scrolled through the headlines. Photos of her and Lorenzo filled the screen, her poised smile, his unreadable expression, their hands barely touching but close enough to suggest alliance. The captions called her elegant, enigmatic, impossible to ignore. For the first time in her life, people weren't laughing at her. They were wondering who she was. She handed the tablet back to Maria and whispered, "I think I finally understand what he meant." "What's that, miss?" Maria asked. Ava smiled faintly. "That disappearing isn't safety. It's surrender." That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She sat by the window again, looking out at the dark ocean. Somewhere below, the tide whispered against the rocks, constant and powerful. In the reflection, she caught a glimpse of herself, no longer the woman who had stood frozen at a gala while the world mocked her. This version had learned to stand straight, to speak clearly, to meet power without flinching. The transformation wasn't in the dress, or the lights, or even Lorenzo's influence. It was in the quiet decision she made every day to stop shrinking. Downstairs, Lorenzo worked in his study, unaware she was still awake. When he looked up at the window and saw the faint light in her room, he smiled once, a rare private smile, before returning to his papers. For all his planning, for all his power, he hadn't expected this, that teaching someone else strength would remind him what it looked like. The morning sun had burned off the fog that usually clung to the cliffs. From her balcony, Ava could see the ocean glittering like polished steel. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries carried on the wind. The world looked calm, but her thoughts were anything but. Lorenzo had told her they would be attending an opera that night, a grand event attended by politicians, investors, and socialites. "The perfect stage," he had said. "People believe what they see under bright lights." Ava had pretended to agree, but inside she still questioned why she was doing this. Every time she looked in the mirror now, she saw a stranger in designer clothes and a controlled smile. At breakfast, she found Lorenzo already dressed in a tailored dark suit, reading something on a tablet. He looked up as she entered. "Sleep." "A little," she admitted. "You'll need more than a little," he said, putting the tablet aside. "Tonight is not about endurance, it's about presence." "Presence," she repeated, sitting down. "You make it sound like I'm performing in a play." "You are," he said, sipping his coffee. "Everyone in that theater tonight is performing. You'll just play your part better." Ava took a slow breath. "And my part is what exactly?" "My equal," he said simply. "Not a decoration. Not a rescued victim. Equal." She blinked. "That's a big promotion." "You've earned it," Lorenzo said. "But it's fragile. One mistake, one flicker of hesitation, and they'll smell the weakness. They'll think I've gone soft. And you can't afford that," she said quietly. He gave a small nod. "No. But neither can you." She studied him across the table, trying to read the lines of his expression. He wasn't joking. Beneath the calm exterior, everything he said carried weight. She wondered what kind of life turned a person into someone who measured words like currency. Finally, she asked, "And if I don't want to keep doing this?" He met her eyes. Then say so now. But understand what happens next. Damien will crawl out from under the stone he hides beneath and start whispering again. The same people who smiled at you last night will laugh tomorrow. And everything you've rebuilt will collapse. Ava hated that he was right. She hated even more that he said it so plainly. I'll go, she said at last. Good, he said, standing. Maria will prepare you. That evening, Ava barely recognized herself. The gown Maria had chosen shimmered like black water, the fabric flowing when she moved. Her hair was swept into a low twist, a few loose strands softening her face. A thin line of silver traced her eyes, making them brighter, colder. When Lorenzo appeared at the foot of the stairs, even he paused for a moment. He didn't compliment her, but the look in his eyes was acknowledgment enough. Ready? He asked. I think so. He offered his arm. Then we go. The opera house was ablaze with light and sound. Cameras flashed as luxury cars lined the entrance. Reporters shouted names. Photographers jostled for angles. The moment Ava stepped out of the car beside Lorenzo, the noise shifted, curiosity sharpening into intrigue. The crowd recognized him immediately, the powerful, untouchable De Luca. But their eyes kept drifting to her. Lorenzo leaned in just slightly. Smile. Don't think. Just own it. She smiled, and the cameras exploded in a storm of light. The sound was deafening. The fear she'd expected never came. Instead, she felt something else, a strange, quiet exhilaration. After years of being invisible, she was suddenly the center of attention, and she wasn't crumbling under it. Inside, the opera house was a sea of velvet and gold. Musicians tuned instruments under a crystal chandelier. Guests whispered behind fans and champagne glasses. The De Luca name carried its own gravity. People parted as they walked by. Lorenzo greeted a few influential faces, introducing her simply as Ava Carter, my associate. No elaboration. No apology. Just fact. The simplicity gave it power. Halfway through the evening, she noticed Damien near the bar, standing stiffly in his tuxedo. His expression flickered between disbelief and anger when he saw her. He began moving toward them, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lorenzo noticed at the same moment. Stay calm, he murmured. Damien approached, glass in hand. Ava. Didn't expect to see you here. Ava steadied her voice. Life is full of surprises. He laughed too loudly. So I see. You've moved up quickly. Quite the connection. Lorenzo's gaze cut across him like a blade. Mr. Hale, he said smoothly, you seem nervous. Not at all, Damien said. Just surprised to find old acquaintances mixing with new money. Lorenzo smiled slightly. I'm older money than you could imagine. Now, if you'll excuse us, Ava and I have better company to keep. He turned, guiding her away before Damien could reply. The conversation lasted less than a minute, but it sent ripples through the room. By the time they reached their seats, Ava could already feel the change in the air. Whispers followed them, but this time the tone was different, cautious, curious. When the lights dimmed for the performance, Lorenzo leaned closer. You handled him well. I didn't do anything. You didn't flinch, he said. That's more than most people manage. Ava looked at the stage, where the orchestra swelled with sound. Why do I feel like this is just the beginning? Because it is, he said quietly. The opera ended with thunderous applause. Outside, reporters waited again, their questions flying like darts. Lorenzo ignored them, steering her through the flashing lights. Ava kept her chin high. She realized she didn't need to act anymore. Her posture, her calmness, it all felt natural now. In the car, as the city lights streaked past, Lorenzo said softly, they saw what I wanted them to see. What's that? A woman no one can humiliate again. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The sound of the tires on the wet road filled the silence. At last, Ava said, You're very good at playing puppeteer. Lorenzo smiled faintly. Maybe. But you're the one they'll remember. 2 nights later, they were back in the spotlight, this time at an exclusive charity auction held in a glass-roofed hall high above the city. The event was invitation only, with guests from every corner of power. CEOs, politicians, even foreign dignitaries. The atmosphere hummed with money and ambition. Ava had started to grow used to the rhythm of these appearances. The cameras, the stares, the whispered speculation. But something about this evening felt different. Lorenzo seemed more focused, more guarded. Even his usual calm carried an edge. "What's happening tonight?" she asked as their car pulled up to the entrance. He adjusted his cufflinks. "Tonight, they test us." "Who?" "The same people who smile when they want to see blood," he said. "Don't give them any." That wasn't comforting, but she nodded anyway. Inside, the hall glittered like a world made entirely of crystal. Music floated through the air. Waiters drifted between tables carrying champagne. Lorenzo guided her to the center of the room where the real players stood, the kind of people who decided which businesses rose and which ones vanished. As they entered, conversations paused. All eyes turned toward them. Ava felt the old tension creeping up her spine, but she pushed it down, remembering every word he had taught her. Never let them see uncertainty. Lorenzo exchanged greetings, his charm cool and precise. He didn't need to dominate the space. It bent around him naturally. Ava played her part, listening, smiling, answering when spoken to. But as the evening wore on, she noticed Damien again. He had managed to secure an invitation. He hovered near the edge of the crowd, his expression bitter, his drink untouched. "He shouldn't be here," she whispered to Lorenzo. "He's desperate," Lorenzo said. "Men who fall fast always are." At one point, Damien finally approached, unable to stay silent. "Quite the display," he said. "Is this what you've become, Ava?" A prop for his reputation. The room went still. Conversations faded. Even the music seemed to drop to a hum. Ava's heart pounded. The humiliation from that first gala flashed through her mind, but this time she didn't freeze. "No," she said, her voice steady. "Not a prop. A reminder." Damien frowned. "Of what?" "That you never deserved the loyalty you wasted." A low murmur swept through the crowd. Damien's face turned red. Lorenzo stepped forward then, his presence alone silencing everyone. "That's enough," he said quietly. "Apologies are due." Damien laughed nervously. "You think I'll apologize?" "For telling the truth." Lorenzo's tone didn't rise, but it carried. "You've mistaken survival for courage. Apologize now, or walk out and never walk in anywhere that matters again." Damien hesitated. The silence pressed down like a physical weight. Every eye in the room was on him. Then, forcing a brittle smile, Damien muttered, "Fine. I'm sorry, Ava. For everything." The apology was hollow, but it didn't matter. The act itself was defeat. Lorenzo turned to her. "Satisfied?" "Yes," she said. "Finally." The crowd began to murmur again, the tension breaking, but Lorenzo wasn't done. Without warning, he took her hand and drew her closer. The motion was calm, deliberate, but it sent another shock through the room. He looked down at her, eyes unreadable. "Then let's make sure no one ever questions it again." Before she could respond, he bent and pressed a kiss to her forehead, a simple gesture, but filled with certainty and finality. It wasn't romantic. It was a statement. The flash of cameras followed instantly. The photographers caught the moment from every angle. Around them, the whispers surged. When he pulled back, Lorenzo's expression hadn't changed. "Now," he said quietly, "everyone will believe what I want them to." Ava looked up at him, half stunned. "You planned that." "I plan everything," he said. "And now you're untouchable." He turned to the crowd, his voice smooth. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the bidding can begin." Later, as the event ended, they slipped into the night. The city glowed outside the car window, but Ava barely saw it. "You used me again," she said softly. Lorenzo didn't deny it. "Yes." Why? He looked out the window. Because the world only respects what it can't control. They needed to see that no one controls you anymore, not even me. Ava studied his profile, the hard lines softened by the passing lights. You think I don't see what you're doing? I think you're starting to, he said. The car drove in silence after that, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. There was something new between them now, an understanding built on survival, not trust, but stronger for it. When they reached the mansion, Lorenzo opened the door for her. You did well tonight. She managed a small smile. So did you. He inclined his head. Get some rest. Tomorrow, the world will talk. And what will they say? They'll say you belong to no one, he said quietly. And that will be the most dangerous truth of all. That night, Ava sat awake again, scrolling through the endless stream of photos and headlines. Every outlet had captured the same moment. The man in black, the woman in silver, the quiet kiss that froze the city. They called her De Luca's mystery partner, the woman who silenced a scandal, the calm in the storm. For the first time, Ava realized the world's gaze didn't frighten her anymore. It fueled her. Downstairs, Lorenzo stood by the window, watching the waves break against the cliffs. He knew the story would spread exactly as he intended. But what he hadn't planned for was the way her presence had started to shift something inside him, something he thought he'd buried long ago. He turned away from the sea and murmured to himself, "So this is what it looks like when power learns to breathe." Morning sunlight cut across the ocean, glinting off the waves like broken glass. Inside the De Luca mansion, the day began with the soft hum of routine, staff moving quietly, phones ringing in distant rooms, the faint scent of coffee drifting through marble halls. Ava was at the breakfast table, flipping through a newspaper she barely read. Her photo was everywhere now, the mysterious woman beside Lorenzo De Luca, the calm presence that silenced a scandal. The words no longer felt like daggers. They felt like armor. Lorenzo entered without a sound. "You're early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. He poured coffee and sat across from her. "Neither could I. We've stirred a nest of vipers." "Because of the gala?" He nodded once. "Because of the impression it left. You've changed how they look at me, and that's dangerous." She frowned. "Why dangerous? Don't they respect you more now?" "They respect fear," he said. "But now they're curious. They want to know why I let anyone stand beside me." His eyes lingered on her. "Curiosity in my world usually ends badly." Ava folded the paper. "Then what happens next?" "We keep control of the story," Lorenzo said. "That means meetings, appearances, and one last thing." "What thing?" He slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial documents, spreadsheets, ledgers, bank statements she recognized all too well. The heading read Sterling Innovations Holdings. "Damien's company," she said softly. "Yes. And it's crumbling. He's been hiding losses, moving money through shell firms, lying to investors. You can see it in the numbers." Ava scanned the pages, her instincts kicking in. He's been padding quarterly gains with projected revenue that doesn't exist. If someone audited this, he'd be finished, Lorenzo said. "Completely." She looked up sharply. "You want me to help you destroy him?" "I want you to help me reveal him," Lorenzo corrected. "You know these numbers better than anyone. You helped build his empire once. Now you'll dismantle it." Ava hesitated. "That feels like revenge." Lorenzo leaned forward. "It's not revenge if it's justice. He humiliated you, used your work, and left you in the wreckage. I'm giving you a chance to take back what he stole." She stared at the figures, the cold, familiar patterns that had once been her world. The part of her that feared chaos wanted to turn away. But another part, the one Lorenzo had been waking, wanted to see the truth laid bare. "What happens if I do this?" she asked. "Then the story ends," Lorenzo said simply. "And you walk away clean." "And what happens to you?" "I don't get to walk away clean," he said. "That's not how men like me end stories." For the first time, she heard something like weariness in his voice. It made him human, and that was almost harder to face than his power. She closed the folder slowly. "All right," she said. "Tell me where to start." For the next 2 weeks, the mansion became a command center. Ava worked in the library, surrounded by spreadsheets and reports, tracing financial trails until her eyes blurred. Lorenzo moved between meetings and late-night calls, his world tightening around them both. Sometimes they spoke little, working in silence that felt almost companionable. Other times, they argued about strategy, about risk, about how far they should go. "You can't just leak this," Ava told him one night. "If people know it came from you, it'll look like a personal vendetta." "It is," Lorenzo said. "But not the kind you think." "Then make it look like exposure, not destruction," she said. "Let the numbers speak for themselves." He paused, studying her across the desk. "You've changed." "You taught me to," she replied. Lorenzo's expression softened. "Then I'll listen." It was a small moment, but it felt like a shift, the first time he treated her not as an ally in his plan, but as an equal in his war. By the 3rd week, Damien's empire began to crack. The financial press started asking questions about inconsistencies in his quarterly filings. Anonymous sources leaked internal documents. Investors pulled back. Within days, his company's stock fell, and whispers of fraud turned into headlines. Ava followed the news in silence. It should have felt satisfying, but instead it left her hollow. Lorenzo found her that evening on the terrace, staring at the sea. "It's done," he said quietly. "I saw. You don't look pleased." "I thought I would feel free," she said. "Instead, I just feel tired." He stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. "Freedom is heavier than revenge. It asks you what you'll do next." "What will you do next?" she asked. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Prepare for the backlash." "From Damien?" "From his allies," Lorenzo said. "The men he owed favors to. The ones who think I broke one of my own kind." Ava turned to him. "And what happens to me if they come for you?" He met her eyes steadily. "Then they'll regret it." For a long moment they said nothing, the ocean wind tugging at their clothes. The quiet between them was no longer uneasy. It was an understanding forged by shared danger. When he finally turned to go, Lorenzo said softly, "You've done enough, Ava. The rest is mine." But she knew the story wasn't finished. Not yet. It started 2 days later. Ava was in the library when Maria entered, her face unusually pale. "Miss Carter," she said quietly, "a package arrived for you." "For me?" Ava frowned. Who would? Maria handed her a small black envelope. No return address. No name. Ava opened it, and a photograph slid out, a picture of her leaving the opera house with Lorenzo, taken from a distance. Across the bottom, in neat red ink, were 5 words. "Pretty pawns break so easily." Her stomach turned cold. Where did this come from? Maria shook her head. No courier claimed it. Before Ava could speak again, Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, sharp-eyed and tense. What happened? She handed him the photo. His jaw tightened as he read the words. "Who sent it?" she asked. "I can guess," he said grimly. "Alessio Vero." She recognized the name from snippets of Lorenzo's conversations, a rival businessman with ties to darker networks, a man who had never forgiven Lorenzo for cutting him out of a deal years earlier. "What does he want?" "Leverage," Lorenzo said. "He's testing my patience." Ava felt a chill. "Using me?" "Yes," Lorenzo said, folding the note carefully. "He's trying to see how far I'll go to protect you." She tried to keep her voice steady. "And how far will you?" "As far as I have to." He pressed a button on his phone. Within minutes, 2 security men appeared. "Double the guards. No one enters or leaves without clearance. And sweep every communication line." They nodded and left. Ava crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. You can't fight everyone, Lorenzo. He looked at her. I don't intend to fight everyone. Only the ones who touch what's mine to protect. The words made her chest tighten. You mean me. I mean the peace I've built, he said. And you're part of it now. For the next few days, the mansion's rhythm changed. Guards patrolled the grounds. Every car that came and went was checked twice. Ava felt both safe and trapped, a guest in a gilded cage. Lorenzo became quieter, more withdrawn. He spent hours in calls, his tone clipped and cold. When he did speak to her, it was brief, a question, a warning, a reassurance she didn't quite believe. One evening, she found him in the study, standing over a map spread across the desk. Red markings crisscrossed it like veins. You're planning something, she said. He didn't look up. I'm anticipating something. You mean retaliation? He finally met her eyes. They'll try to corner me. Maybe through business, maybe through you. Either way, I'll end it before it starts. And if they hurt you, he smiled faintly. They won't get the chance. Ava stepped closer. You talk like everything is a chess game. It is, he said. But the mistake people make is thinking they're the only player who can move the queen. She frowned. And what am I in this metaphor? Lorenzo's gaze softened. The reason the board still matters. For a moment, the room felt too small, the air too heavy. Ava turned away, trying to hide the confusion on her face. You can't protect me forever. No, he said quietly. But I can make sure no one else harms you. The next afternoon, the threat became real. Ava was in the garden when she noticed a dark car idling beyond the gate, unfamiliar, tinted windows. Two men sat inside, watching. The moment one of Lorenzo's guards stepped forward, the car sped off down the hill. By the time Lorenzo returned that evening, she was pacing the foyer, pale and tense. Someone was here, she told him. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he said, They're watching for weakness. They won't find any. Ava's voice shook. You can't keep pretending you're untouchable. He stepped closer. I'm not pretending. His calm only unsettled her more. You don't even look scared. I don't have time for fear, he said. It clouds judgment. And what about me? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Am I supposed to just sit here and act like nothing's happening? He reached out and touched her shoulder lightly, grounding her. No, he said softly. You're supposed to trust me. For a heartbeat, she almost did. That night, thunder rolled across the sea. The storm hit fast, rain lashing the windows in silver streaks. Ava sat awake in her room, unable to shake the image of the car at the gate. Then, a sound. A faint click downstairs, like a door opening. She froze. The guards were outside. Maria was asleep. Someone was in the house. Ava slipped into the hallway. The power flickered, lightning flashed across the glass walls. A shadow moved below, two figures near the main entrance. She caught her breath and turned to run back to her room, but another shape appeared at the top of the stairs. Lorenzo. He didn't shout or panic. His voice was low, calm, absolute. Go back inside. Lock the door. What's happening? She whispered. Just do it. She obeyed, closing the door as quietly as she could. From inside, she heard faint movement, footsteps, a thud, then silence. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, a knock. It's me, Lorenzo's voice said. When she opened the door, he stood there, coat wet from rain, expression steady but darker than she'd ever seen. They're gone, he said simply. Who? Vero's men. Testing the perimeter. Ava stared. They came here. They won't again. What did you do? He hesitated just a moment before answering. Reminded them whose house this is. She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to. Later, When the storm had quieted and the guards resumed their patrols, Lorenzo stood at the window of his study, watching the rain ease over the ocean. Ava joined him, still shaken. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "As long as you have enemies." "I've always had enemies," he replied. "You've just never seen them this close. Then maybe I shouldn't be here." He turned to her, his voice firm. "If you leave now, they'll follow you. You'll be easier to reach alone. So I'm trapped. You're protected." She met his gaze. "You keep saying that like it's the same thing." For a moment, something unreadable crossed his face. Regret, maybe, or admiration. "You've learned to argue like me," he said softly. "I've learned to survive like you," she corrected. The rain stopped, leaving only the steady sound of waves. Lorenzo exhaled slowly, then said, "Rule number 3. Ava almost smiled despite the tension. "There's a rule number 3? "Always expect the attack to come when the night feels calm." She looked out the window, the dark sea stretching endlessly below. "Then I guess we don't get calm nights anymore." "No," Lorenzo said quietly. "But we get stronger ones." The storm passed, but the quiet that followed carried its own weight, the beginning of a new kind of battle. Ava had entered his world unwillingly, but now it was changing her in ways she could no longer deny. And Lorenzo, for all his power, had begun to realize something dangerous too. You can plan for every threat, except the one that walks into your life uninvited and refuses to be afraid. The sky was low and gray the next morning, clouds hanging heavy over the sea. The mansion seemed quieter than usual. Even the staff moved more softly, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. Ava stood by the window of the library, the same place where she had first agreed to Lorenzo's impossible deal. Her reflection stared back at her, sharper now, less uncertain. But inside, she felt anything but strong. The photograph, the threat, the break-in. It had all blurred together into one long, sleepless fog of tension. Lorenzo entered without knocking. He didn't apologize. He never did. But his presence filled the room with the same calm authority that had first unsettled her, that strange mixture of control and quiet care. "You haven't eaten," he said. "I'm not hungry." He crossed to the desk, setting down a folder. "You will be. The body breaks before the mind does." She turned, folding her arms. "You talk like I'm a soldier." "You are," he said simply. "In a war you didn't ask for, maybe, but one you're fighting all the same." "That's not comforting." "It's not supposed to be." Ava exhaled and sank into the nearest chair. "You always sound like you've already lost something." That caught him off guard. His expression didn't change much, but a flicker passed through his eyes. "What makes you say that?" he asked. "You speak like a man who's already paid a price," she said. "You talk about loyalty, protection, fear, like you learned them the hard way." He studied her, the way he always did when deciding how much truth to reveal. Then he sat opposite her, clasping his hands. "When I was younger," he said slowly, "I believed power meant control. That if I could predict everything, plan everything, I would never lose anyone I cared about." "And?" she asked softly. He looked toward the window, at the gray water. "Power can't protect the people who stop believing in you. I learned that late." Ava didn't know what to say. She had never heard him sound vulnerable before. Not broken, but human. "I didn't know you could lose faith in someone powerful," she said. "You can," he replied. "Because power without trust is just fear." They sat in silence for a moment. The fire popped softly in the hearth. Ava said, "You know, I used to think fear was what kept me safe. If I worried enough, if I stayed careful enough, nothing could hurt me." "And did it work?" She smiled faintly. "Not really." Lorenzo leaned forward. "Then stop living afraid." She looked up. "That's easy for you to say." "It's not," he said quietly. "It's what I've been trying to do for years." Something about that honesty broke through her usual defenses. The man who had always seemed untouchable suddenly looked tired, not defeated, just burdened by his own armor. "You don't have to do all of this for me," she said after a long pause. "I'm not doing it for you," he said. "I'm doing it because I chose to." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes," he said. "One is obligation. The other is loyalty." Ava's chest tightened. "And where does trust fit in?" He hesitated, and for once, didn't have an answer. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. Alessio Vero just made a move. "What kind of move?" Ava asked. Lorenzo stood, already shifting back into the man of action. The kind that doesn't stay quiet for long. That night, the storm returned. Wind howled through the cliffs, rattling the windows. Lorenzo had been gone for hours, leaving Ava with strict instructions not to leave her room. But she couldn't stay still. Every sound made her flinch. Every flicker of lightning looked like headlights turning up the drive. By midnight, she gave up trying to sleep and went downstairs to the library. It was dimly lit, the fire still burning low. She sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and stared into the flames until her mind began to drift. She didn't hear the door open until Lorenzo spoke. "I told you to stay upstairs." She jumped slightly. "You said stay safe." "This feels safer than sitting alone in the dark." He stepped closer, rain dripping from his coat. "You don't listen very well." "Neither do you," she said. "You keep walking into danger." "That's my job." "It shouldn't be." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm outside roared. Lightning flashed across his face, carving his features in stark light, the calm, unreadable man she'd come to know. Finally, she said quietly, "Are you afraid of anything, Lorenzo?" He hesitated, then sat beside her. "Yes." "What?" "Losing control," he said simply. "And what happens after?" "Then maybe you should stop pretending you can control everything," she said gently. He turned to her, and there was something raw in his eyes, something he didn't show anyone else. "And maybe you should stop pretending you need saving." They looked at each other for a long, heavy moment. The storm thundered outside, the world shrinking to the small space between them. "Why are you helping me, really?" she whispered. He took a slow breath. "Because the night I saw you standing in that ballroom, I saw myself, before I learned how to fight back. You reminded me that strength isn't born. It's forced out by pain." Ava's throat tightened. "That's not strength. That's survival." "They're the same thing," he said. For a while, they sat in silence, the storm slowly fading beyond the glass. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "You can't save me from all this, Lorenzo." He looked at her. "I don't intend to. I'm just teaching you how to save yourself." 3 days passed in uneasy calm. The threat letters stopped. The guards relaxed slightly. For a moment, it seemed as though the danger had receded. Then, everything unraveled. It happened at dusk, during what was supposed to be a simple dinner. Lorenzo had arranged a small gathering, a few trusted associates, an excuse to appear calm, unbothered. Ava had been reluctant to attend, but he insisted. "It's important," he told her. "Vero watches for weakness. He needs to see strength." So she agreed, dressed in a simple black dress, her nerves steady for once. The dining room was warm, filled with low conversation and the clink of glasses. Lorenzo sat at the head of the long table, speaking quietly to one of his men. For a while, everything seemed normal, too normal. Then the door opened. A tall man entered, broad-shouldered and heavy-set, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite fit his rough demeanor. His presence sucked the warmth from the room. Ava didn't recognize him, but Lorenzo did. His expression hardened instantly. "Silas," Lorenzo said. The name was cold in his mouth. "You weren't invited." The man grinned. "Didn't think I needed an invitation to congratulate you on your new companion." The guests went silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Ava felt every eye turn toward her. Lorenzo rose slowly. Leave. Easy, DeLuca, Silas said, still grinning. I just came to see the woman who made the city forget you're a monster. Lorenzo's men shifted in their seats, ready to move, but he lifted a hand to stop them. Ava stood, her pulse racing. You should go. Silas chuckled. So the lady speaks. Tell me, do you know what kind of man you're playing house with? Or does he keep that part hidden? Enough, Lorenzo said quietly. Silas stepped closer to Ava. They say you used to work for Hale. Funny, that. You must like powerful men. Shame you keep picking the wrong ones. Before she could move, Lorenzo was between them. His voice dropped to a tone that chilled the air. If you touch her, you'll never lift that hand again. Silas smirked, pretending not to notice the danger. Still the same old threats. You've gone soft, DeLuca. But Lorenzo didn't argue. He just looked to one of his guards and gave a small nod. The guard moved faster than anyone saw coming. A step forward, a quiet impact. Silas staggered backward, hitting the table with a crash that shattered glass and spilled wine. The room froze. Lorenzo didn't raise his voice. You will walk out of here and tell Vero that the next time he sends someone to test me, I won't be merciful. Silas, pale and shaken, nodded. 2 guards escorted him out, leaving behind the wreck of dinner and a stunned silence. Ava's hands trembled, but she stayed standing. Lorenzo turned to her slowly. His face was calm again, but his eyes burned with fury barely contained. I told you this would happen, she said quietly. He took a breath. And I told you I'd handle it. That was handling it. That was restraint, he said. The other guests began to leave quietly, the tension too heavy to endure. When they were alone, Ava rounded on him. You can't keep doing this. You can't solve everything with threats. He looked at her, almost weary. In my world, words are just quieter weapons. And if your world gets me killed, she demanded. It won't, he said. You can't promise that. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I don't make promises. I make guarantees. She stared at him, searching his face for something. Fear, doubt, anything human. And what happens when someone finally calls your bluff? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked toward the window, the rain starting again outside. His reflection in the glass looked like a man carved from stone. I'm not the one who should be afraid, he said quietly. They are. That night, the house was silent again. The broken glass had been cleaned, the guests long gone. But Ava couldn't shake the sound of the crash, the sight of how easily Lorenzo's calm could turn into violence. She found him in the study later, still awake, staring out at the storm. He didn't turn when she entered. You can't keep fighting every shadow, she said. He smiled faintly. I've been fighting shadows my whole life. You don't have to. He finally looked at her. And what would you have me do? Stop. Let them think they can reach you, reach me. Maybe let them see you're not untouchable, she said softly. Maybe that would scare them more. For the first time, he seemed to consider it. You're learning too fast, he said. I had a good teacher. She started to leave, but he called her name. Ava. She stopped. You asked me once what I'm afraid of, he said. I think I just realized it. She turned back. What? Losing the one person who doesn't see me as the monster they whisper about. Her breath caught. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She just stood there in the doorway, the storm flickering between them like a living thing. Finally, she said quietly, then stop proving them right. And with that, she left him alone with his thoughts. A man who had built a fortress around his heart, now realizing the cracks had already begun to show. The morning after Silas's intrusion broke with a sharp wind coming off the sea. The sky was pale, washed clean by the storm. In the mansion, though, the air was still tense. No one spoke much at breakfast. Lorenzo stood at the window, speaking quietly into his phone. His tone was clipped, decisive. Ava caught pieces. No leaks, not through the port. Yes, if he moves again, we cut the shipment before it lands. He ended the call and turned. He's escalating, he said simply. Vero? Ava asked. Yes. The man who can't win clean will always attack what he can reach. She felt a shiver crawl down her spine. And what can he reach now? Lorenzo hesitated. That pause told her more than any words could. Me, she said quietly. He didn't deny it. You're the only unpredictable part of my life. That makes you dangerous to them. Dangerous? She echoed. To me, he said. If they hurt you, they prove I can be moved. I can't let that happen. His phone buzzed again. Another message. He frowned. Stay here, he said, already heading for the door. Where are you going? To make sure Vero remembers who he's provoking. Lorenzo. But he was already gone. By afternoon, the mansion felt colder, emptier. The staff avoided her eyes. The guards at the gates looked more alert than usual. Ava tried to distract herself, going through old reports in the library, but her mind kept circling back to the same thought. He's walking into danger again because of me. When the phone on the desk rang, she jumped. It was Maria's voice, thin and nervous. Miss Carter, there's been an incident. Her stomach dropped. What kind of incident? Mr. DeLuca's car was ambushed outside the industrial port. They're bringing him back. The words hit like a physical blow. Is he alive? Maria said quickly. But injured. Ava was already on her feet before the line went dead. Rain had begun again when the convoy returned. Headlights carved through the mist as the black sedans rolled up the long drive. The first car stopped, doors flying open. Lorenzo stepped out, supported by one of his men. There was blood at his temple, dark against his skin. Ava ran toward him. Lorenzo. He looked up, trying to hide the limp in his stride. You shouldn't be out here. Neither should you, she said fiercely. You're bleeding. It's nothing, he muttered. But when he stumbled, she caught his arm and refused to let go. Inside, the doctor was already waiting. The staff cleared the hallway as Ava helped him into the sitting room. He sat still while the doctor cleaned the cut on his forehead and checked for deeper wounds. You're lucky, the doctor said. If that glass had gone an inch lower. I make my own luck, Lorenzo said dryly. Ava stood nearby, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. When the doctor left, she finally spoke. What happened? Vero wanted to send a message, he said. He succeeded. She sat beside him. Then you have to stop. Please, Lorenzo. You can't keep doing this. He looked at her, eyes dark and steady. If I stop, he wins. And when men like him win, they destroy everything in reach. Including you. I'm not worth this war, she said. His voice softened. You're worth ending it. They stared at each other in silence, the unspoken words heavy between them. Rest, she said finally. You can fight tomorrow. He gave a faint, tired smile. You sound like me. Someone has to, she said. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of the moment he'd stumbled, of the blood on his skin. The image wouldn't leave her. So she went back downstairs. The sitting room was dimly lit. Lorenzo lay stretched on the couch, an ice pack resting on his shoulder, eyes half closed. He wasn't asleep. I told you to rest, he said without opening his eyes. I could say the same, she replied. He smiled faintly. Touché. She sat down across from him. You really would have died out there, wouldn't you? Just to prove a point. His eyes opened. Not a point. A warning. To who? To everyone who thinks fear still works on me. Ava studied him for a moment. You keep acting like fear is the enemy. But it's not. It's the thing that keeps people alive. He didn't answer. Maybe you should try being afraid for once, she said softly. Not of losing power. Of losing yourself. For the first time, he looked uncertain, just for a heartbeat. If I start being afraid, he said, I may never stop. Then maybe it's time you learned how. The storm outside eased. Silence settled over the house. Neither of them spoke again, but something in the air changed, the distance between them shrinking, the space between power and trust blurring. For the first time since she had met him, Lorenzo looked less like a myth and more like a man. And Ava, despite everything, realized she didn't want him to face this war alone. Morning came cold and clear. The newspapers had already printed the story. Business tycoon ambushed near port. And no comment from De Luca Enterprises. Ava stared at the headline over breakfast. It felt surreal. Only hours ago she had been cleaning blood from his sleeve. Now the world was treating it like gossip. Lorenzo walked in, suit pressed, face composed. The cut on his forehead was bandaged neatly. You should be in bed, she said. And let them think I'm weak. He shook his head. No. The moment I hide, they smell blood. She pushed the newspaper toward him. They already do. He scanned the front page. Good. Let them think I bled. They'll underestimate me next. Ava gave him a disbelieving look. You plan to use your own near-death as strategy? He smiled faintly. Every move counts. You're impossible. I've been told that, he said, sipping his coffee. The day moved in tense rhythm. Lorenzo met with his lawyers, his security chief, his board. Ava stayed close, quietly observing. She could see the exhaustion beneath his calm, but he refused to show it. At noon, a courier delivered a package. Another black envelope. This time, Lorenzo opened it himself. Inside was a note, just one line, written in the same neat hand as before. You survived once. You won't twice. Ava's stomach twisted. What does he want, Lorenzo? Money. Territory. None of that, he said, crumpling the paper. He wants to make me doubt myself. To make me look over my shoulder. And is it working? He looked at her, expression unreadable. Not yet. But that night, when the house fell quiet, she heard him pacing in the study long after midnight. 2 days later, a call came that changed everything. Lorenzo was on the terrace, speaking to one of his contacts when his phone rang again. He frowned at the number, then answered. Ava heard only fragments of his side of the conversation. What? When? How long ago? Then silence. He hung up slowly, his face pale. What happened? She asked. Vero's men, he said quietly. They took one of mine. Who? Marco. He's been with me for 10 years. Ava covered her mouth. What are they going to do to him? I don't know, Lorenzo said, voice flat. But I intend to find out. She stepped closer. Then let me help. He shook his head. This isn't your fight. It became mine the moment they came after you, she said. He hesitated. The look in her eyes, steady, determined, reminded him too much of himself. Finally, he nodded once. Then listened carefully. The plan was simple but dangerous. One of Lorenzo's informants had tracked a signal from Marco's phone to an abandoned dock on the outskirts of the city. It was a trap, obviously. But they couldn't wait for proof. By nightfall, they were on their way. Ava rode in the car beside him, the city lights sliding past like streaks of fire. You shouldn't be doing this yourself, she said. He smiled faintly. You sound like Maria. She's right. Perhaps, he said. But some debts can't be paid by proxy. They reached the docks just before midnight. The air was damp and cold. Lorenzo's men spread out silently, weapons drawn. Ava stayed behind the car door, heart pounding. Then, from inside one of the warehouses, came a muffled shout. Marco, Lorenzo said. He started forward, but she caught his arm. Lorenzo, wait. He looked down at her hand, then nodded once. "Stay behind me." They moved through the shadows, every sound magnified, the echo of footsteps, the drip of water from rusted pipes. Inside, the air smelled of oil and salt. They found Marco tied to a chair under a single hanging bulb. He was bruised but breathing. When he saw Lorenzo, relief flashed in his eyes. "Boss." But before he could finish, a voice came from the dark. Well, De Luca himself. Alessio Vero stepped into the light, smiling. "You really do love playing hero, don't you?" Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "You should have stayed hidden." Vero laughed. "And missed the fun?" No. I wanted to see how far you'd go for one of your own." "Let him go." "Or what?" Lorenzo took a slow step forward. "Or I'll make sure you never speak my name again." Vero's smile faltered just slightly. "You've lost your edge, Lorenzo. You bring a woman to a gunfight." Lorenzo didn't glance at Ava, but his tone was steel. "She's worth 10 of you." The tension snapped. One of Vero's men moved first, raising a weapon. But before he could aim, Lorenzo's guard fired, a sharp, echoing crack that scattered the room into chaos. Ava ducked behind a crate as shouts filled the air. She saw Lorenzo move with terrifying precision, calm, methodical, unstoppable. Within minutes, the fight was over. Vero was gone. His men scattered. Lorenzo untied Marco, helping him up. "You're safe," he said. When they finally stepped out into the cold night air, Ava exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You could have been killed." He glanced at her. "So could you." "Then maybe we're both stupid," she said. "Maybe," he said, almost smiling. "But we're alive." Back at the mansion, dawn was just breaking. The sky was streaked with gold, the kind of fragile light that comes after storms. Lorenzo stood on the balcony, looking out over the cliffs. Ava joined him, her hair tousled by the wind. "Will it ever end?" she asked quietly. He didn't look at her. "Wars like this don't end. They just change shape." She leaned against the railing. "Then maybe we stop fighting it." He finally turned, meeting her gaze. "You think we can?" "I think we have to try," she said. "Otherwise, it never stops owning us." He studied her for a long moment. "You sound like someone who's no longer afraid." "I'm not," she said. "Not of them. Not anymore." Lorenzo's expression softened. "Then you've learned the hardest lesson." "What's that?" "That courage isn't the absence of fear," he said quietly. "It's what you choose to protect in spite of it." They stood there in silence as the sun rose, casting light across the endless sea. For the first time in weeks, the world felt still. Ava didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether Vero would strike again, or whether Lorenzo would ever find peace. But she knew one thing. The woman who had once stood frozen in humiliation at a party was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had survived fire and learned how to breathe through it. And beside her stood a man who, for all his power and flaws, had finally remembered what it meant to fight for something real. The week after the dock rescue was a strange kind of quiet. Too quiet. The newspapers had gone silent, the business channels stopped speculating, and Vero's name hadn't appeared in any reports. But for Lorenzo De Luca, silence never meant safety, only preparation. He'd been through too many wars to mistake peace for mercy. Ava, however, tried to believe the quiet. She wanted to. For the first time in months, she could breathe without fear chasing the edges of her thoughts. She walked through the mansion gardens in the mornings, worked from the library during the day, and ate dinner with Lorenzo under the faint hum of normalcy. Until the night he said, "He's coming back." The words froze her. "How do you know?" she asked. He didn't look up from the file on his desk. "Because men like Vero don't disappear. They retreat." She moved closer. "What does he want now?" "He lost everything." Lorenzo turned the page, his tone calm but heavy. "He still has pride. That's more dangerous than power." He finally looked up at her, eyes dark as the sea. You've seen how this game works. The moment you think it's over, someone starts the next move. Ava folded her arms, steadying her voice. Then what's yours? He closed the file. To finish it before he does. She hated how calm he sounded. You mean go after him? Yes. Alone. He smiled faintly. You sound like Maria. Because we're both sane, she shot back. You're still recovering from being ambushed. I heal quickly. This isn't healing, Lorenzo. This is obsession. He stood, walking toward the window. The city lights below flickered like scattered gold. You don't understand, he said quietly. Men like Vero think fear keeps them immortal. I have to remind him that even ghosts can bleed. She walked closer, her voice firm. You're not going after him alone. You're not coming, he said without turning. I wasn't asking permission. He finally faced her, something sharp and unguarded flashing in his eyes. Fear, not for himself but for her. You think I couldn't live with my own blood on my hands, he said. You're wrong. I've done it before. But I couldn't live with yours. The words cut through the room like glass. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ava said quietly, Then don't make me a reason to regret trusting you. Lorenzo left that night. He took only 2 of his men, saying nothing about where he was going. Ava wanted to stop him, to make him see reason, but she knew better. Lorenzo didn't bend to fear, not even his own. Hours later, Maria found Ava in the library, staring at the rain against the window. He'll come back, Maria said softly. You sound sure. He always does, Maria replied. But when he does, something in him is always gone. Ava looked out at the dark sea. Then I hope this time it's the anger. For 3 days, the mansion waited in uneasy silence. No calls. No news. No word from Lorenzo or his men. Ava couldn't sleep. Every sound made her flinch. The creak of the old staircase, the wind through the shutters, the clock ticking too loud in the dark. By the 3rd night, she stopped pretending she wasn't afraid. When the phone finally rang, she nearly dropped it. Maria's voice was shaky. He's back. Ava didn't even grab a coat. She ran. Lorenzo's car pulled into the driveway just as dawn began to rise. He stepped out slowly, the bruises on his face faint but visible. His suit was torn at the shoulder, and his left hand was bandaged. He looked exhausted, but alive. Ava met him halfway down the steps. You're hurt. It's nothing, he said, voice rough. It's over. Vero? She asked quietly. Lorenzo didn't answer right away. Then, he's gone. The way he said it made her shiver. Gone how? He met her eyes, and the silence said enough. She swallowed hard. And now, he said, we rebuild. He walked past her toward the house, but she caught his arm. You can't keep doing this, fighting, losing pieces of yourself, calling it survival. He stopped. The wind tugged at his coat. What do you want me to do, Ava? Pretend I can be someone else. Yes, she said simply. Because maybe you can. He turned, and for the first time, she saw not the cold strategist or the man who could stare down danger without blinking, but someone tired of carrying too much. He didn't answer her. He didn't have to. The storm inside him was louder than the one they'd survived. That night, the mansion felt different. The tension that had once held it upright began to fade. Guards relaxed. Maria hummed softly as she cleared the dining table. But for Ava, peace felt temporary, fragile like glass. She found Lorenzo in the library, standing by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. What now? She asked softly. He didn't turn. Now, we disappear for a while. We. He nodded. The city's full of vultures. They'll smell the blood before morning. I won't give them a story to feed on. She hesitated. And after that? He finally looked at her, his voice softer. After that, maybe I find out what I am when I'm not at war. Ava stepped closer, her heart tightening. And what am I to you when that happens? He didn't smile, didn't deflect. The only person who ever told me the truth. They left the city 2 days later. Lorenzo's convoy moved at dawn, a trail of black cars winding up the coastal road. Ava watched the skyline shrink in the rearview mirror, the towers, the lights, the noise, until it was swallowed by mist. The countryside felt unreal, green hills rolling under heavy clouds. When they reached the secluded villa by the cliffs, it looked almost peaceful. A place built for quiet, not power. Maria greeted them there, already waiting. "Everything's prepared," she said. Lorenzo nodded. "Good. We'll stay until I say otherwise." The first few days passed in strange stillness. Lorenzo spent most of his time outside, walking the cliffs alone or sitting by the edge of the gardens, watching the sea crash against the rocks below. Ava worked in the study, trying to read, but her thoughts always drifted toward him. The man who had once seemed unshakable now looked almost human, tired, reflective, and lost in thought. One afternoon, she found him sitting by the cliffside, coat draped over his shoulders, the wind tearing at his hair. "You'll catch a cold," she said softly. He didn't turn. "I've survived worse." Ava sat beside him. The sea stretched endlessly ahead. "You've been quiet." "Quiet doesn't mean peace," he said. "I know." They sat in silence for a while, the waves roaring beneath them. Then she asked, "Was it worth it?" "All of it." He took a long breath. "When I was younger, I thought power would protect me. I built walls so high that no one could touch me. And yet here I am, bleeding behind them. You still think power matters?" "I think it's all I know." She turned to him. "Then learn something else." He smiled faintly, not mocking, but almost wistful. "And what should I learn?" "How to live," she said. "Not survive. Live." He looked at her for a long time, the wind pulling between them. "And you'd teach me that?" "If you'd let me." That evening, as the sun sank low, the air turned cold and still, too still. Lorenzo's instincts sharpened instantly. He stood at the window, eyes narrowing. "Do you hear that?" Ava frowned. "Hear what?" "No wind. No birds." Before she could answer, a guard burst into the room. "Sir, motion on the east perimeter." Lorenzo's calm returned like a reflex. "Positions. Now." Ava's heart pounded. "Lorenzo." "Stay here," he said, grabbing his coat and heading for the door. But she followed anyway. Outside, the night was heavy and silent. Guards moved through the trees, flashlights slicing the darkness. The sound of footsteps echoed, too many, too close. Then, from the shadows, came the glint of a weapon. "Down!" Lorenzo shouted, pulling Ava behind the stone wall just as a shot cracked through the night. Chaos erupted. The guards returned fire, shouting orders. Ava pressed herself against the wall, her breath ragged. "Vero's men," she gasped. "Or what's left of them," Lorenzo said. His tone was ice. "They came to finish what he started." The firefight lasted less than 5 minutes, but felt like forever. When it ended, the woods fell silent again, broken only by the wind. Lorenzo stood slowly, scanning the trees. "It's over." Ava looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You said it was over before." He exhaled. "This time, I'll make sure it is." Later, when the guards confirmed the perimeter was clear, Lorenzo and Ava returned to the house. Maria fussed over her, checking for injuries, but Ava waved her off. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Just tired." Lorenzo dismissed the guards and poured 2 glasses of water. His hands trembled slightly, the first sign of exhaustion she'd ever seen from him. "You're hurt," she said. He looked down at the small cut on his arm. "Barely." "Barely is still bleeding," she murmured, taking a clean cloth and pressing it gently to the wound. For once, he didn't resist. He just watched her hands, the calm precision of her movements. "You're not supposed to be here," he said quietly. "And yet I am," she said. "You should know by now that I don't take orders well." He gave a faint smile. "I noticed." When she finished bandaging his arm, he looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had once flinched under the world's gaze now stood steady before him, eyes calm and unafraid. "You've changed," he said softly. "So have you." He shook his head. "No. You just learned to see through the armor." She smiled. "Then maybe it's time you took it off." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Then, finally, Lorenzo said, "Rule number 4. Ava raised an eyebrow. "There's a rule number 4? "Always know when to stop fighting." She tilted her head. "And have you?" He looked toward the window, where dawn was just beginning to break, soft gold light spilling across the cliffs. "I'm trying," he said. Ava smiled faintly. "Then that's enough." When morning came, the storm had passed for good. The sun rose clear and strong over the ocean, painting the waves in silver and gold. Ava stood on the balcony, breathing in the salt air. Behind her, Lorenzo joined her, his steps quiet. "You're thinking about leaving," he said. She didn't deny it. "Maybe. The city will move on eventually. I should too." He nodded slowly. "You could. And you." He looked out at the horizon. "I'll stay a while." For the first time in years, the quiet doesn't feel like punishment. She turned to him. "You'll be okay?" He smiled faintly. "For the first time, I might be." Ava studied him, the man who had once lived like a storm, now finally standing still. "Then maybe we both learned something after all." He met her eyes. "That survival isn't living? That strength isn't solitude," she said. He nodded. "Then yes, we did." They stood in silence as the sun climbed higher, the sea roaring below. The war was over, but its echoes would remain, reminders of what they had lost and what they had found in each other. When Ava finally turned to leave, Lorenzo didn't stop her. He just said quietly, "If the world ever turns against you again." She smiled. "You'll say, 'She's mine, I know.'" He chuckled softly. "No. I'll say, 'She can handle it.'" And for the first time, she believed him. The days after the final storm were strangely calm. The sea no longer roared beneath the cliffs. It murmured quietly, as though the world itself had exhaled. In the villa, the rhythm of life slowed. The guards patrolled less often. Maria smiled again. Even Lorenzo slept through the night, though Ava could tell by the way he sometimes stood by the window at dawn that his mind never truly rested. Ava, too, had changed. The fear that once ruled her had faded. She walked through the halls without flinching at every sound, spoke with confidence, and carried herself like someone who had found her footing on uncertain ground. But with peace came a quiet ache, the knowledge that this peace wasn't hers to keep. She had begun packing days ago, quietly, without telling Lorenzo. Not because she wanted to leave him behind, but because staying meant she might never learn to stand alone again. The morning she decided to go, the air was heavy with mist. She found Lorenzo in the study, reading a report he didn't seem to see. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said. He didn't look up immediately. His hand froze on the page. "I thought you might," he said quietly. Ava hesitated. "You're not going to stop me?" "I could," he said. "But I won't." She stepped closer. "Because you don't care?" He looked up then, calm, steady, but with something deep and raw behind his eyes. "Because I care enough not to trap you." The words sank into her like sunlight breaking through fog. "I don't belong in your world," she said softly. "You made it better while you were in it." "And you?" she asked. "What happens to you now?" "I rebuild," he said. "But differently this time. No more empires. No more battles that end in blood." She smiled faintly. "I don't think you know how to stop fighting." "Maybe not," he admitted. But maybe I can choose what's worth fighting for. He stood then, crossing the distance between them. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was full of everything they didn't know how to say. Finally, he said, "When I met you, you were afraid of being seen. Now, people will remember you for standing next to me and never bowing your head. That was never my doing, Ava. That was you." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "You changed me too, you know." "How?" "You taught me that power doesn't come from being feared. It comes from being unafraid." He gave a small, tired smile. "Then I guess we saved each other." For a moment, she wanted to tell him she would stay. That maybe they could build something beyond all the storms they had survived. But when she met his eyes, she saw it, the part of him that would never stop guarding, never stop fighting. The man the world would always demand something from. She reached out, touching his hand lightly. "Goodbye, Lorenzo." He didn't pull away. "Goodbye, Ava." That evening, the sun dipped low over the cliffs, painting the water in shades of copper and fire. Ava stood on the balcony, her suitcase by her side. Maria hugged her tightly before stepping back, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You were good for him," Maria whispered. "I think we were good for each other," Ava said. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway then, his coat over his arm, his face composed as always. But there was something different in his eyes, an unguarded sadness. "I'll take you to the station," he said. "You don't have to." "I want to." They drove in silence. The road wound through the hills, the ocean stretching endlessly beside them. The radio hummed softly, filling the quiet between them. When they reached the small coastal train station, Ava turned to him. "This feels strange," she said. "Goodbyes always do. Do you ever get used to them?" He shook his head. "No. You just learn not to fight them." The train horn sounded in the distance. Long, low, inevitable. She picked up her bag. "Take care of yourself." He nodded once. "And you? Don't let the world make you small again." "I won't," she said. Then, with a faint smile, "Don't let it turn you to stone." "I'll try," he said quietly. She stepped forward and did something neither of them expected. She hugged him. Not out of gratitude, or pity, or fear. Just something human, something final. He didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he returned it, one hand at her back, steady and warm, like an anchor letting go. When she finally stepped onto the train, she looked back only once. Lorenzo stood on the platform, motionless, watching until the train disappeared around the bend. And then she was gone. Weeks passed. The world moved on. Ava found a small apartment in the heart of the city, quiet, filled with light. She returned to work under her own name, consulting for companies who once ignored her. This time, when people spoke her name, it wasn't as someone's ex or someone's shadow. It was her own. Sometimes, when she walked through the city, she would catch whispers about Lorenzo de Luca. "He's rebuilding something new. He's gone quiet. Must be planning again. They say he turned down a deal worth millions." She never asked for details. She didn't need them. She knew the man behind the rumors, and she knew he wasn't chasing power anymore. Still, some nights she found herself standing by her window, looking out at the skyline, half expecting to see a black car waiting below. It never was. But the thought never made her sad. It made her smile. Because she knew if he ever needed her, truly needed her, he'd find her. And if she ever needed him, she wouldn't have to call. Far from the city, in the villa by the cliffs, Lorenzo stood on the balcony where she once stood. The wind swept through his hair, and the sea thundered below. Maria appeared behind him. "It's quiet again," she said. "For now," he replied. She hesitated. "You miss her." He didn't answer. "You could go after her," Maria said softly. He shook his head. "No. She walked into my world when she shouldn't have and walked out stronger. I won't pull her back." Maria smiled sadly. "You taught her too well." He turned slightly. "No. She just learned faster than I expected. Later that night, he opened his desk drawer and took out a small silver pendant, one she had left behind by accident, tangled in a drawer in the guest room. He turned it in his hand, the light catching on the curve of the metal. He remembered her laughter the night she first arrived, the way she had flinched at the chaos around him, the strength in her voice when she finally stopped being afraid. He placed the pendant on the desk beside a map of the city. "You were right," he murmured. "Power isn't control. It's choice." And for the first time, Lorenzo de Luca made a choice that wasn't about war, or territory, or survival. He walked away from the desk, left the lights burning, and stepped outside into the cold night. The sea wind stung his face, and he welcomed it. The world would call him a man reborn, or a man broken, depending on who told the story. But he knew the truth. He was neither. He was simply a man who had finally learned when to stop fighting. Months later, Ava received a letter. No return address, no name, just a single page. The handwriting was unmistakable. "You once told me fear keeps people alive. You were right. But sometimes, it also keeps them from living. I hope you're doing the latter." Oh. Ava folded the letter and slipped it into her notebook. Outside her window, the city lights glimmered against the dark. She smiled, not sadly, not wistfully, but with the quiet strength of someone who had survived her own storm. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a man who once believed he owned the night finally understood that letting go wasn't weakness. It was freedom. Years later, people would still tell the story, though never the same way twice. Some said the powerful Lorenzo de Luca disappeared into the quiet life of the coast, building schools and charities instead of empires. Others said he returned to the city in secret, still watching over the world he'd once ruled. And when anyone asked what had become of Ava Carter, the woman who once silenced a room full of doubters, the answer was simple. She became the kind of woman no one dared to underestimate again. Every story ends, but every ending is a beginning. Subscribe, like, and stay with me, because the next tale might just rewrite what you believe about strength, love, and fate.